Okay. Well, just a few thoughts just to get the ball rolling. I don't think it's so much that it's worse than ever before, but certainly I think we're living through a period of change, and certainly there is stress in the system. I think we have to see it in the context of wider social change as well, and I was going to focus on two areas of change: personal integrity and sexual ethics. So to start with integrity, as kids, certainly I was brought up on the story of George Washington and the cherry tree. And do you remember that one? Father, I cannot tell a lie. Right, well, we're now in the era of Trump and post-truth. Now, you know, when we were brought up in those kinds of stories, and it is a myth, that story, it's not real, nevertheless, as kids, it didn't mean we told no lies, but we knew that our role models weren't supposed to, and we knew what good looked like. So that's kind of measure of change. Watching The Apprentice a few years ago with my kids, at a time when I was still on the board of the Bar Standards Board, I don't know if any of you remember the guy who did the pterodactyl impression. There was a kind of scream involved somewhere in there. And he was found out to have faked his CV. And he wasn't chucked off the programme. In fact, he went on till almost the last round. And I found myself profoundly shocked by this, because I just couldn't imagine that nobody thought there was anything at all seriously wrong about it or worthy of remark. And I was left reflecting on the difficulties of being a regulator, trying to regulate a profession who are held to higher standards than the rest of society in circumstances where that gap is in fact widening on issues like perceptions of integrity, what does good look like. When even some lawyers don't know when they're overstepping the boundaries on integrity, you might think that getting rid of the subjective element in the test of dishonesty in the SDT was certainly overdue. Now, if I turn to sexual ethics, there's a movement going on in the other direction. Change is being forced on the legal profession because it was actually trailing behind other parts of society. And unacceptable behaviour is being outed in ways that simply wouldn't have happened a number of years ago. But it's not that there are more sexual predators now than there were once upon a time. You've only got to watch Mad Men to know otherwise. But obviously there are big challenges, and I think some of the big challenges are around what are the boundaries for the regulator here? What is private and personal? Are we actually saying that there should never be relationships in a workplace? Quite what are we saying? I'm interested in the question of how a culture can either support or undermine ethical behaviour, and how a given peer group can create its own subculture, which may be better or worse than that of wider society. Lawyers are expected to behave better. But obviously we know that peer groups can produce toxic cultures. Think Enron and the smartest guys in the room. And I think we do have a lot to learn from other disciplines. I think regulators should be spending more time looking at the research in areas like psychology, economics, and anthropology, and thinking about how they can borrow from that and how they can apply it in their own area. I mean, take the concept of lawyers as people who owe fiduciary duties, putting others before yourself. How do you inculcate altruism? And are we building law firm cultures that are unlikely to attract and sustain altruistic behavior in altruistic people? If the reward system in your firm is eat what you kill, are you going to breed good fiduciaries? That's the sort of problem I think that we should be spending more time thinking about. And lawyers, of course, don't just owe duties to their clients. Another area that's come under stress recently, and I'm sure you will all have read the SRA's Walk the Line piece about this, is recognizing when to say no to what the client wants to do. Now, when a law firm tells its keen young applicants for training contracts that it's looking for commercial awareness, what exactly does it mean? What behaviours is it looking for? What will it reward? Is that phrase a form of code for just doing what the client wants? And I think we should also study the effects of hierarchy, and I'd be very interested to hear views from you about this. Law firms have in common with some other environments like surgery, civil aviation, they're very hierarchical environments. And it can be hard to challenge the expert who sits at the top of that hierarchical pyramid, whether it's the surgeon who leaves the swab in the patient or the partner who leans that little bit too close at the drinks after the deal has gone down. and makes the associate feel uncomfortable. Now, the ability to challenge and be supported by others when challenging is one of the things I think we need to address when we're talking about culture and changing the culture around sexual ethics, but also more generally. I think regulators might need to take a lead, not just in setting rules, but in researching what makes people comply with them. How do you internalize compliance? And they could then help law firms understand better how to build and nurture ethical culture. Thank you.